Welcome again to the Envirahation podcast. We have been having very intense discussions on climate change and environmental sustainability. If this is your first podcast, please go watch the others. And we have tried to create awareness and to educate you on matters that concern you when it comes to the conversations on climate change and environmental sustainability. In this podcast, we will be talking about emission reduction activities. My name is Wangeshikar. Karimi.
And my name is Bikoro Gisamba.
Bikoro was seated there wondering, is she going to introduce me? Is she?
I was wondering when that time would come.
So
We finally got here.
I was like, hey, let us tell people the girl is here. So emission reduction activities, as we had mentioned in a previous podcast, when your carbon footprint is high, it is equal to high carbon emissions in the atmosphere,
Yeah.
which we said by extension is what is causing the greenhouse gas effect and global warming.
Yeah.
And we said how you can take part in this whole sustainability, environmental sustainability and climate action agenda is by reducing your emissions. So that if you're producing carbon, and I remember saying this, that carbon must be produced. Your day-to-day activities must be produced. And if you're producing carbon, there is a way that you can reduce the amount of carbon that you produce by taking part in emission reduction activities.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about it from an individual point of view, and then we're also going to be talking about it from like a business company's point of view. So which one do you want to start with? Individual?
Individual. Let's do individual.
Let's do individual. So how can individuals reduce the amount of carbon or generally reduce their carbon footprints?
I feel like we had talked about this before, but a major thing you can do, okay, it's really major, but one of the things you can easily do is say using public transport instead of using your own personal car. Instead of everyone using their own private means of transportation, you can all get together, use maybe the rail system or matatus, and this way, like, you're all emitting the same, instead of each one emitting it, instead of each individual emitting
accumulative carbon.
So it's accumulative. Yeah.
And it is lower. We broke it down better in the discussion on carbon footprint, and we talked about why public transport and carpooling and all of these activities are normally they are advised. They are normally advised, so that by the end of the day your carbon impact as an individual is reduced. Another thing I think people underplay is energy. When it comes to energy efficiency, how can you as an individual reduce your carbon footprint? It's the small things. Turn off your lights
when you're not using them.
Yeah. The cameraman is looking at the amount of lighting in this. We are using it. Now, let's make it clear that we're not telling you to significantly change your lifestyle and go into the desert and be hungry. We're not calling for that kind of thing. We are saying while you're still living as comfortably as you can, don't be wasteful.
Why say wasteful?
Why should a light be on
when you're not using it? Yeah.
Exactly. When you're using it, it's a different story. Emit your carbon. We allow it because carbon must be emitted. But when you're not using it, it defeats a lot of logic. And in the implication of turning your lights on, especially if you're using non-renewable energy, is that the less coal, the less non-renewable energy that is used up, the less carbon that is released into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
What is another way that they can reduce their emissions?
You can choose to installing technology that minimizes wastefulness. For example, like we mentioned in the rooms, you can install the bulbs or whatever that
the energy-saving bulbs,
energy-saving bulbs, or also bulbs that come on when you get into the room, such that when you leave, they just go off. If you're not in the room, the lights are off. When you come back on is when they're on. Another thing is the water with the taps. Badala ya let the water run when you're not there washing your hands, it's off, like the water is not running.
Even when you're brushing your teeth, the water should not be running as you're brushing your teeth. When you're rinsing your mouth, it's a different story. But when you're brushing your teeth, that is unnecessary wastage.
Unnecessary.
When you cut down trees, plant them. Reforestation is one of the greatest carbon sequestrators. One thing about trees that I learned the other day from someone called Fiona, Future.
Future.
It's Future. Yeah, she's an environmental activist in Kenya as well. One thing I learned from her is that trees still they keep that carbon. When you cut down the trees, the carbon is stored in the wood. So tree planting is very essential when it comes to reducing your carbon footprint and essentially reducing the amount of carbon that is in the atmosphere. So these trees sequestrate this carbon, and then you cut them down, plant others. So you see, you still have a wood house, but you still have contained some amount of carbon. So tree planting activities, while we say they are not the only ones, they are very, very, very necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another thing which is maybe controversial or whatever is, switching to showering instead of using water baths. The tabs are really they take up more volume as compared to showering.
Yeah, but see, also it depends on how long do you shower.
Oh yeah, we say there's people that shower for 16 hours. Yeah. But if you're showering just the normal amount of time, if you compare that to using a tub, you're definitely using more water with a tub.
Yeah. Another activity would be this one is also very controversial. Efficiency in transport, like switching to electric vehicles as compared to using internal combustion engines. Now, we said in another podcast that all of these vehicles have a carbon impact. Both of them have a carbon impact. One during its production and the other one while in your daily usage. Now, while it has a carbon impact, the electric vehicle engine is better in the sense that it also creates a better environment when it comes to conversations on air pollution. Not just climate change per se, but also air pollution.
And health.
And health.
Mentioned health.
Yes, and I mentioned health. And in another podcast, I also mentioned a research that was done in California where they introduced these vehicles. And then in those zip codes where these vehicles were introduced, these electric vehicles, there was significant decrease in the numbers of patients in the emergency rooms that came with asthma and other respiratory attacks. So that is a very important thing that we need to mention. That while even though both of them have some sort of carbon impact, this one leads to less asthmatic incidences in the emergency room
as compared to the other. Yeah.
What is another emission reduction activity?
Off the top of my head, maybe buying second-hand clothes instead of having to buy new clothes.
I would argue against that.
You would? Tell me.
Carbon impact of transport. Where the second-hand clothes come.
Well, if I'm buying my clothes and shipping them from Alibaba, as compared to okay.
It's the Alibaba.
Okay, but the essence here is reuse. Yeah, instead of getting new things, reusing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reusing, reducing and reusing.
Reusing, yeah.
Something else that leads to an environmental sustainable human beings is reducing plastic and other non-decomposing. Plastic decomposes after 500 years. Now, if you're going to replace that with something else, let it be something that is not single use. Because the biggest problem is normally that people replace their plastics with glass jars and then they use these glass jars once, and then it automatically goes back to the environment. So it is part of that waste.
But with glass jars, we see them reusing.
Yeah, but some people don't.
Especially with beer bottles. For alcohol that is imported. Yeah.
It's not reused, most of it. There's a place in Utawala that I know where they just dump bottles. These bottles that can be used for DIYs. There's a lot of sensitivity around how you can use glass bottles, reuse them, and people are not doing that. So one way you can actually do it is it's just the number of R's. They reduce, they reuse, and recycle. There's
another one.
I love the fact that you said there's another. I just left it like that for people to go find out. I mean,
assignment. This is not a class, but assignment.
This is normally just a discussion of us telling you what we know and trying to educate you. And I think so far we've done a pretty detailed job.
I think we have, yeah.
All right, so let's go to emission reduction activities for organizations and companies. How can you reduce emissions for organizations and companies? What are some of emission reduction activities?
Switching to cleaner energy.
Yeah, like for instance?
Instead of using fuel, that is non-renewable oil and whatever,
Yeah, we're talking
you
about
can
natural gas.
you can choose to use solar to run your industrial activities.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one way. And there's normally a lot of controversies when it comes to solar, because the solar panels, what are they made of?
Coal.
And we normally
See?
say, I mean, when it comes to the conversation of reducing your emissions, the simple steps matter. They might not be as significant. And of course, when if we want to see the change that we want, the big oil companies, those ones are the ones that we need to start at. Big companies like Amazon, they're the ones that we need to target. But even as individuals, we need to also not underplay our role
in
in
climate
emissions,
change. Yeah,
in climate change. And since we have a role that we play, we need to have a role that we play in reducing.
We are consumers, by the way, of these big companies.
If we didn't buy these things,
they would not be
producing.
business. Yeah.
There was actually an argument that I don't remember what company the company leaders were saying. They were saying that we are not the ones that are producing this carbon. It is our consumers. You, as the consumer of the market, you need to start buying sustainably.
Well, that is why people boycott products, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is why people boycott products, because you're looking at the carbon impact of its production and you're like,
this is too much.
And then now there's also the carbon impact of its consumption. There's consummation. That's why.
Consumption.
We
can say consummation. Except
like
consummation means some other thing.
Yeah. I have second language. And we still speak it. There's also purchasing carbon from communities that can actually reduce the impact. Now, when we talk about companies purchasing carbons, we are talking about you just generally paying for one an activity that reduces the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. We're talking about tree planting, river regeneration activities, and also paying for an activity that replaces one that emits a lot. Yeah. Like, for instance, if someone came up with a solution to internal combustion engines, for instance, if you as a company, for you to buy those carbon offsettings, you have to go support that project. You supporting that project is your way of managing your carbon. It's an emission reduction activity.
But this argument against carbon trading, for just carbon trading, another view of it is that it's like allowing for emissions. It's like allowing for emissions. If I'm rich enough to be able to buy all your carbons, why shouldn't I continue going above my cap? Because it's like it's permitting emissions.
Yeah, that's true.
It's permitting any emissions.
There was also a study. My studies, but there was also a study. There was a new research that was done that was showing the how carbon trading is not necessarily all good in front of the eye, because this community did not receive, number one, the money for the credits. The company that was in charge of the trading is the one that got the money, and then there was a lobbying within a carbon trading area. Once they've sold the carbons and they've retired, they cut down the trees. So that's a little messed up. While there is a lot of questions and glitches in that system of carbon trading, I would argue in the sense that it is effective, because if you can buy, if you're rich enough to buy, then okay, sawa.
Buy. I'll keep buying.
Keep buying because the carbon trading, the amount of carbon, the price of carbon should be lifted to the point where there's a pinch in your stomach. There's a pinch
from
so
the
by the end of the day, yes, from the buying,
it becomes too expensive to buy. It's cheaper to actually reduce the emission.
So that's the whole essence of taxing the carbon, so that it is now more expensive to be producing carbon than it is to be
buying to be allowed
than emitting. Yes. So that is the whole essence of, that should be the goal of carbon trading, to the point where now we are targeting zero emissions, absolutely no emission. Something else that companies can do to reduce their emissions is them themselves taking part in educating and creating awareness. Companies have such great emissions, but if the individuals within those companies actually took initiatives, we would see necessary change. And creation of awareness starts within your company. If you're part of an organization, a company, yada 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 yada, speak to these people. Okay, make them aware. By the end of the day, once we always said, once the attitudes of these people change, once you look at the environment as a source of goodies for you, once you look at the environment as a gift that is given to you that you need to take care of as a steward, as we have talked about in other episodes.
Yeah.
Once you look at it like that, even if you're the CEO of these companies, you want to change the narrative.
Yeah.
You want your company to become sustainable. You want it to become environmentally cautious. And how do we get these people to change their attitudes? By educating them.
Yeah.
That is why we have Envirohation. So by the end of the day, we ensure that you understand the conversations on environmental sustainability
And what you can do.
and what you can do.
Yeah,
before
and
we
what you
start
can
to
lobby
judge.
for the companies around you to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, something else people can do is your food choices.
Yeah. What you eat.
What you eat
Yeah.
matters. We've had the discussion on diet before when we were talking about carbon trading and carbon footprint. When we had that conversation, we talked about the discussion on diet. By the end of the day, it's what can you do at your own personal level. Now, you might never stop eating meat, and that is okay. And you might not be able to take up a car, but what are you doing on the other side?
Yeah.
You
What
know?
can you do?
What
It's
can
always
you do? It's always-
bottles down to what can you do.
Yes. What ability? Yeah. Did you see that joke that was going around? Someone reading the Constitution and being all like, the difference between can and may.
No.
All right. So it's what can you do? It's what we start with. What can you do, and then what can you push yourself out of your comfort zone to do? And then we have things like air travel, where people should stop going abroad.
Or rather, if you have to fly,
I just looked at you. I was waiting for you to say something. I was waiting.
or rather, if you have to fly, you can fly non-stop, just
Yeah.
one way instead of the frequent layovers. If
Yeah.
if you can avoid the layovers, avoid them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also buying what you need.
Yeah.
Hey, on Amazon. You don't need all of those gadgets in your kitchen. Stop. And they're made of plastic.
And they're made of plastic, yeah.
Stop buying things you don't need. Cookie cutter that looks like this.
A cookie cutter?
You don't even bake cookies. You're buying cookie cutters. Stop buying cookie cutters. Stop.
We are major consumers right now.
As
I really
a
don't.
world, as a people,
We consume so much that we
because
need.
the other people do not need.
We buy so much. What happened to minimalism?
What happened to minimalistic?
Was it
living?
ever there? I feel like it's gonna come up as a movement in future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gen Alpha. We leave it to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. How to live a green life is to just think about it like this by the end of the day. What am I getting and what am I giving?
Yeah.
When we talk about the conversation of environmental economics, which is going to be another series that we're going to come up with, we're going to be looking at the idea that everything that comes from the environment must go back.
Back. Yeah.
And what state it goes back matters.
Yeah.
Because now when plastics are created, so they have to come from there, yeah? And then now it is created into a compound that decomposition takes so many years. So you need to really think about it before you get it. How are you going to decompose? Like the whole process. How am I going to use it? Do I really need it? How am I going to, remove it?
Remove it. Yeah.
Yeah. Energy. Think about it like that. Transportation. And by the end of the day, how do I improve where I am at? The question of tree planting. It's all about improving your community, making greener spaces, being a steward, taking care of what you already have.
Yeah.
It's the whole aspect of what we've been talking about. That emission reduction comes from you thinking cautiously about the environment and actually changing your attitude and changing your mind. All right. Give us a parting
skills,
shot.
attitude, participation. Yeah. That's
Give
it.
us a parting shot. I mean, I give it.
Oh, a parting shot? You need a parting shot from me.
Yes.
Well, it all comes down to what do you need? Do you really, really need what you're buying? Consume less. I feel consume less.
Wear second-hand.
Minimalism. Wear second-hand clothes. But yeah, don't buy what you don't need. Don't eat more than you need. Don't do things you don't need to be doing for the sake of sustainability.
And remember that you're a servant.
steward.
You're a steward.
Yeah.
To these environments. All right. That
From
was very
us
subtle.
on our studios, it's adios, muchachos.
Oh, Zai. How long have you been blind to say that? In which podcast are you blind to say you've been? Oh, we will see you next time. And do not forget to reduce your emissions.
Yeah.